Welcome to the Ivory Attic. I'm Ian Escherwood.
And I'm Kurt Andreessen.
And we have a great episode to bring us back from summer vacation.
Back from summer vacation. At least partially unwilling summer vacation because we find out that as soon as the summer comes around, we can't find any professors.
No, we can't. They've all gone.
they all disappeared.
And we've
went
been
to the wind.
We've been trying to stack people up and record people.
And they're all gone.
They're all gone. They're at conferences. They're traveling. They're just ghosting us.
Yeah, well, I think it's mostly
the
last thing.
But here we are. We're recording in mid-August, and it feels a little like mid-August, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little warm.
A little warm in the attic, but that hasn't stopped Kurt from wearing full seersucker.
Hey, I like to bring. I mean, the seersucker was created for this express purpose. And how about you? What did you decide to go with?
I'm wearing a safari jacket.
Oh, that's good
because it's hot.
I'm disappointed. There's no hat. I'll be honest.
Well, I have to have the headphones on.
Yeah, okay.
And the hat gets in the way of the headphones. But yeah, here we are in our summer attire and recording in the sultry attic.
Yeah.
And we have a special guest as usual here. We
so
have one,
for this one
who came a long way from Gettysburg College.
Hey, but a great journey to come up to this attic.
Yep.
And to join us.
And to bear the conditions.
Exactly.
The rough conditions that we have up here. So I'd like to introduce you to Professor Benjamin Kennedy. Ben Kennedy has his BA from Swarthmore College, his MA, or Master of Science in Teaching Mathematics from Boston College, and a PhD from Rutgers University, and has been at Gettysburg College since 2007 in the math department.
All right.
Rising through the ranks to full professor.
Look at that.
We are very honored to have Ben here. Ben, I wanted to say something about your research in the introduction, but you are the first guest that we've had on that I don't understand anything about your research. So I'm excited to have Kurt talk to you about your research and to maybe learn something about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he teaches our students, so he can probably get halfway with you.
Well, and I hate to confess this right off the bat, part of the reason that I was keen to come to Gettysburg College was because they did not have a math requirement within the mid-1990s. I know, and so I made it through 4 years here without any math.
Well, despite all that, welcome, Ben.
Sorry, Ben.
Well, let's make up for it right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right. You now have a math requirement right now, and you're doing it here. Right. So
let's get out the whiteboard.
No, exactly. Actually, this is a good first start. We're going to do it. Let's start with a softball question, but actually, that can be very controversial. Are you a whiteboard or a blackboard person?
Oh, blackboard all the way.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And you're a whiteboard person, right?
I'm a whiteboard person.
I can't. The choice for me is what would I rather have on myself? The marker stuff or the chalk stuff? Because there's no option not to have it all over me. So the answer is the chalk stuff.
This is true. Although I will say the worst incident of that I've ever had has been with chalk, where this was early on in my teaching, little green. And I was lecturing. I felt like I had a really good class going on, 40-some students, and I was wearing a dark navy blue pants, and I had done a lot of writing on the board with the chalkboard that was there, and I stuck my hand resting on my backside, and apparently turned around and had two perfect handprints on my behind, which the students lost it. And I, of course, had no idea what was going on. And it took until the end of the class until one of the students actually told me that I had two handprints on my butt.
Yep.
So
there's a lesson in that.
I don't know what it is, but I tell you what the lesson was. I don't rest my hand. I'm very careful where I rest my hands.
Well, and that sort of thing is a lot less disruptive the second time.
Yeah, but
So Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into math?
All right. Well, I grew up in Watertown, Massachusetts, which is outside of Boston.
Oh, okay.
And I always liked math, and never thought of myself as very good at it. I went to high school with tracked math, and I was always sort of at the bottom of the top section, right? So that was sort of my lane. But I did really enjoy it and got to like it more in college. This isn't just petty, Ian, I promise. I came to college intending to be a history major, and things really went badly with that. So,
you guys like switched.
So I majored in economics and in mathematics, both in college. And I was intending to do policy work in education. That's what interested me when I graduated. So I went off to get certified to teach high school. I thought that I would teach high school for a couple of years. I would go to grad school in economics. I'd teach learn about the system from the inside and that stuff. And while I was there in ed school, I was also taking some math courses, and I realized that I was just so much more interested in that than anything else that I was doing. And so once it also helped that I was rooming with 3 other ex-math majors from college. So we got to talk a lot about math. And so really I had to work myself up to the idea that I was willing to really gamble on doing something that wasn't what I was best at. Studying economics, which I loved. I think economics is a really interesting field. It's a great way to look at the world. But I also got a lot more strokes, studying. I won a prize. All this stuff. And so once I worked myself around to being, willing to try something that I thought, might be quite difficult, I was really excited about it. I did get to work on education and policy for 1 year, which was incredibly fun. Before I started my PhD program, I had a research position at Columbia. So I was doing some statistical research there. I learned a ton. It has a lot to do with my teaching now. I think about that experience a lot when I'm teaching stats classes and stuff like that. And then I started grad school, and definitely I got into my area, because of my advisor, not because of the area so much. I was, interested in, all sorts of things, but, what it's like in graduate school, there are some faculty who are comprehensible and like to talk to you, and other faculty who are incomprehensible and hate to talk to you. So I wound up with somebody who was a really good teacher and doing interesting things. So by the time I was finishing up graduate school, I absolutely knew I wanted to, have an academic job. I loved the teaching part of being a graduate student. I really liked that part of it. And, it's interesting. I recently had my 25th college reunion, and I was struck by how many people I knew more or less casually were completely unsurprised I had wound up doing this kind of job. They're like, "Oh, no shit, you're a college faculty member." Whereas, I sort of viewed it as this meandering journey where I landed. Yeah, and they're like, so it was interesting, I don't know, to have that reflected back to myself.
Did you, with as much hesitation as you had going to graduate school, what was it like when you first got that? Did you find, was it kind of like a switch where you're just like, oh no, this is definitely right and I'm ready? Or was it more like, was it as difficult as you thought it was going to be?
It was more like a switch, partly because I was having been out for a little while and having actually had a job. That was a leg up. I treated it like a job. So, I went, I worked, I came home, that helped. And it certainly wasn't easy, but I also, being in that environment made me realize that the stereotype of the mathematician is like, the intuitive genius or something. It doesn't really, that most of us are not like that. And so if you just care enough to think about something for a year, you usually make some kind of progress. And that's really what is required. There are a couple of those, conspicuously brilliant people, and different people have different talents and everything. But I guess I realized that the whole question of, was I cut out for it, wasn't really a thing. Or maybe more accurately, it was just being interested in it and willing to do it. It was what mattered. Yeah. But it was very clear to me once I was there also that it was what I was most interested in. It was what I wanted to be doing. Partly because, here I can't help but talk a little bit about, I don't know, why I think math is so great to study and why it's why I think it's so interesting.
Pay close attention, Ian.
Yeah. I am.
Yeah. Well, so
I'm thinking if Ben would have been my first year advisor, then I would have ended up in math because you do everything your first year advisor tells you to do.
That's what I've found. Yeah. So the great thing, math does not depend, in the way that sciences do on experiments. We do kind of experiments, right? Yeah, here I go. But it doesn't, the results of math, once they're established, are not subject to question, right? And of course, we read what other people do, and we do a lot of investigation, which is analogous to experimentation in a lot of ways. But we don't rely on text or on, anything that actually happens, in the real world or on field work or anything to know what's true. And I actually find that in a sense really, really comforting. I think it's fun to be thinking about things whose truth is not contingent. Now, the importance, mathematicians will dispute whether or not something is worth caring about, right? Or whether it's interesting, but whether it's true, no. And, so there is, even when you're finding something very, very minor, and I tell this to our students, and our students who do research get to experience this, even if it's some tiny little fact, if you're the first person on the planet to know it, it's really a thrill.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of, wonderful to feel like, you're working on this edifice of kind of figuring out how this logical structure works that, people have been working on for thousands of years, right? So I always feel like I'm sort of part of that project, even when things aren't going well, which is, I recently had a sabbatical. I spent the last half of my sabbatical totally stuck on something which I was sure was true, but I could not prove, which is really exasperating, but it's still fun to feel like you're banging away on something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I completely agree. Like I will say from my side, like the reason I did physics is exactly what you said, which said like, it's fun to be able to be the first human being to know something, even if it's like you said, even if no one actually cares, and like it's not actually important to anything, it's kind of a funny thing to just have the little thing. You're like, I was the first person to know that this number was this, and like slightly relates to that.
This is kind of making me feel a bit existential though, because the idea of trying to work through something to find truth is something that no historian could possibly do because we weren't in the moment and we didn't understand actually what happened. So we always get kind of near the truth, right? Or near the truth as we understand it could be the truth. So I find this is very discouraging for me. And
if it makes you feel better, scientists also never find truth. We have things that we disprove, and if we just haven't disproven it long enough,
right,
we assume that it's probably true. Ben does actually get to find out the things are true, and that is a distinction, I think, right?
Well, right. Mostly because actually there is some mathematicians really do interrogate the logical sort of bedrock of what we do. Most of us do not. You know, so I think that if I knew more about this, I could probably cast more elaborate doubt on everything I do. But the way that most of us look at it is, yes, we're doing we're doing deductions and, finding out what has to be true, given our initial assumptions. And those initial assumptions, the whole thing might be built on sand, but we're pretty sure that most of the basis, for example, of arithmetic comes from our deeply felt experience about like what a whole number is and stuff like that. It would take a lot to shake my confidence in that.
Yeah. You're not too concerned about the fact that 1 + 1 is equal to 2.
Yes.
Yeah. As some people, as 1900 people were really concerned, philosophers were really concerned about.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So Ben, can you explain to us in a way that Ian can understand
Thanks.
what it roughly what your research is, what you're looking into right now?
Sure, I would love to. So I will I'll talk about the broad area first, because I think it's a really kind of the questions that animate the broad area are really neat, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I do in particular. So my area of mathematics overall is called dynamical systems. And it's an odd word. It should be dynamic systems.
I like dynamical. It sounds like you've added an extra syllable, just to make it feel better.
Make it feel better, right? But what a dynamical system is it is a rule or a formula that describes how some quantity is changing in the short term.
Okay.
And so, in particular, what we do is into this. So let's say let's call it a formula. You put into the formula where the quantity is now, what the value of the quantity is now, or maybe what the value of the quantity is now together with some aspect of its past history, how it's been behaving. And then that's what you put into the formula. And then what you get out of the formula is what the quantity is going to be like in the near future. How it's going to change in the next second or the next instant or the next year or something like that. And so the animating question of dynamical systems is, given this formula, this rule, what can we say about how the quantity so governed will behave in the long term?
Okay.
And the thing that is sort of surprised when you first hear about this, it may sound like it's not very interesting, and sometimes it's not very interesting, right? Like, for example, here's a simple dynamical system. Let's imagine bacteria in a dish with unlimited food, okay? And the population of bacteria doubles every hour.
Yeah.
Right? That's a dynamical system. That's a rule for the short-term change. I ask you, how's that going to behave in the long term? You can tell me right away, it's going to get freaking big.
Right. Yeah.
And that sort of end of the story. And you can even write down a formula for exactly what the level will be in so many. But it turns out that even when the rule is really simple looking or easy to describe, the long-term behavior of the system is not always easy to discern.
Okay.
And sometimes the behavior itself is very simple, but it's hard to establish that. Like maybe the system will approach some steady, unchanging amount, right? But it might be very hard to show that. And sometimes the behavior itself in the long term might be very, very complicated. This is what's known as chaos. If you've heard of chaos theory or the butterfly effect, this has to do with systems.
We've all watched Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah.
In fact, I'm dressed like Jurassic Park.
Dressed like Jurassic Park.
And what I know is that when you're trying to pick up a woman, is you drop a thing of water on her hand and start talking to her about chaos. So that's it worked. It worked almost for. I mean, nothing quite worked out for.
I haven't been in a position to try that myself, but and one thing that's interesting though is so even I'll have to try to describe one of my favorite simple formulas, which if you have a pencil and paper or something, you can follow along at home.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
so, great. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'll get my whiteboard out.
If you take a number between 0 and 1,
okay,
like a third, okay,
See, I think I understand that.
I was gonna say, I just wanted to make sure that he was with us. There's numbers that are not whole numbers.
So take that number. This is your input. Take the number, subtract the square of that number.
Okay.
I'm out.
And then multiply.
It's a number multiplied by itself.
And then multiply that whole thing by 4. And that's going to be your output.
Now what?
So
does it have to be 4?
I would rather it be 4 right now. Yeah. No, it doesn't have to be 4. But it's cool if it is 4 because if it is 4, what happens then is that we took an input between 0 and 1.
Yep.
Then the output will also be between 0 and 1.
Okay.
And then of course you can do that same formula again, right? This is what we're doing if we're imagining, say, this is like in some units, the population of some insect species from one year to another, right? This year is insects, do the formula, next year's insects. This is a dynamical system. Well, the sequence of numbers you get that way, doing this over and over again, is going to be chaotic. It's going to go all over, cover all these numbers between 0 and 1. It's never going to settle down into a discernible pattern. It's just going to wiggle around in this crazy way. Neat, right?
It is neat.
And it is neat. And if you do this with a calculator, you can see this. You can, and humankind has only really been aware of chaos, how common it is, for about the last 70 years.
Okay.
And it's really, really common. It's very easy to make it. And one of the reasons that we didn't know about it, I believe, for sort of the first couple of 100 years we were doing dynamical systems, is because a lot of that was motivated by relatively simple systems in mechanics that behave more predictably. And so our math was really made to study these mechanical systems. And as we got into things like biology and were able to have computers help us do more of these calculations, we became aware of how really common it is to have these systems that look really simple when you write down the short-term behavior, but the long-term behavior is entirely unpredictable. So that's the overall field of dynamical systems. I will very briefly talk about sort of the part inside this that I look at the most.
Can I just pause to say,
Of course.
I just want to say it's just hilarious to me because your response as a mathematician to a system like that is the exact opposit of a physicist.
Oh, yeah, I think it's great.
Which is that the instant that a physicist sees that kind of equation, like, well, I'm not doing anything with this. Like, like this is useless. Like, I can't predict it long term. Okay, like I'm throwing that out.
But actually, one of the really interesting then questions is, if it's just crazy long term, do you throw up your hands and say, "Oh, that's crazy long term," or then do you?
Well, I mean, a physicist does.
Oh yeah, but do you attempt to describe the crazy?
Yeah.
And actually, you can.
Oh, that's what historians do. We describe the crazy.
So, with for example, this system I just described to you, you can't sort of, if you take one number and say, what's it going to do in the long term? You can't say after how many steps sort of where it's going to be, but you can calculate the probability it'll be in any given one range afterward.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
So the slice of this that I work on are they're called differential delay equations, and they are rules where the sort of very short-term change in a quantity now is determined by where the quantity was a little bit ago. So imagine a thermostat that doesn't work instantaneously, like no thermostat does, right? But it's sort of a feedback system with delay. And so anytime that you are controlling something with a remote control, feedbacks, or, in physiology, these come up a lot. Like if something's out of whack in your bloodstream and you have to wait around for cells to make proteins or whatever.
No, this is exactly it. This is perfect biology.
Yeah. And so then the question is then how will these systems with this delayed feedback, how will they behave over time? And I've and we've been talking about the difference between all of our disciplines, right? I mean, and as if I ever need reminder of what a mathematician I am and what not a physicist or a physiologist or something I am. Typically, the way that I approach these problems is I simplify them and simplify them and simplify them until I can prove something about them, but they bear absolutely no resemblance to any useful model. Fine. It doesn't bother me.
You've done some good math. Your job is to do good math.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, cool. So, and do you how close? So, how similar is the type of stuff that you do to the actual things you're able to teach in the class? Like is there overlap between those types of things? Is there?
And one of the things I noticed on your CV, I think you've published with students, right?
Yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah.
But or rather, I've done a couple of projects with students. I think I've published one paper with students.
Cool.
The answer to your question, Kurt, is a little bit, sorta.
Okay.
I teach a class on dynamical systems where
cool.
by the time that class is done, students can easily understand some of the problems I'm working on. And there's a standard sophomore sort of mid-level math course for almost every math major takes called differential equations, which studies a particular class of these dynamical systems that have been around for a long time. So
it's one of the few math classes I took taught by a mathematician. I've only taught. I think I've only taken 2 in my career. That's one of them.
And if I'm right about this, taught by a rather eminent mathematician.
From what I understand, yes. Yeah. I didn't know it at the time.
But the so certainly after either of those 2 classes, I can talk to my students productively about sort of the kinds of questions that we can do, and they can get into exploring things if they're so interested.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you went to a liberal arts college.
Yeah.
Did you think you'd end up teaching at one, or did you want to end up teaching at one?
I was really happy to do that, and definitely when I was looking for jobs, I hit those a little harder. Mm-hmm. I was a geographical applicant. I drew a circle. Now that I think back around at it, an appallingly large circle around where my wife would be a medical resident, along with our young son. So I carpet bombed pretty well in that area, but I was interested in a liberal arts environment for sure. Cause, I loved it. And I'm actually a full-on believer in sort of the value of a broad-based education and how enriching it is to study a bunch of different things. And so I was very happy to be able to wind up in such a place. And it's also nice because, I have students who can tell me about a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that is really nice. The other thing, and I actually didn't know this until I was looking at your CV, is that you are, I don't think there are a ton of professors on this campus that have received any instruction in teaching. And so you're one of them. I'm curious, how that differs.
Well, I might have to push back on you a little bit about that. Right. I went to ed school.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. All right.
And I don't think it made a whole lot of difference, at least not relative to, what I've learned from my colleagues and from experience, right? I am sorry to say that I took some really interesting education policy classes, but the classes that I took directed towards pedagogy were not very helpful.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They tended to be a little bit abstract, and maybe the word is even a little bit political.
Oh, okay.
And just harder to get a lot out of them. Yeah. And now my experience student teaching in high school was very, very interesting.
Oh, okay.
But one of the reasons around the time I was realizing that I was going to, go to graduate school and be a mathematician, I did have a really interesting conversation with my supervising teacher. He was a great guy, a crusty old dude named Mark Aronson, and he was a terrific teacher. And we were sort of sitting down talking about how things were going, and he said, "You're doing fine," he said, "but I have a feeling you're more interested in math than you are in teenagers." and I said, "Well, absolutely, all the way." And he said, "Well, in this job, you really got to be at least as interested," I mean, he's a high school teacher,
Yeah, sure.
"at least as interested in teenagers as you are in your subject matter." And I said, "Huh, okay."
But good news, Ben, there's the perfect place for you.
Yeah. And, of course, once I had teenagers of my own, I was profoundly interested in them. But until then,
Well, it's funny. Well, that's it. Because I mean, one of the things that I'll just say I'm always a little jealous of is that and I'll just say it. I think you probably know this, but like the word on the street is you were a really, really good teacher. So like I hear this from all the students, and this is part of my annoyance is that I feel like I consider myself a decent teacher, and my students say that they.
This is one of your hang-ups, isn't it? Whenever you hear that somebody's a really good teacher, you get really upset about it.
It's especially
and then we have them on the podcast.
Well,
and
the problem is they make direct comparisons between us
Of course they
in
do.
my office.
Yeah, right.
And tell me, yeah, you're a good professor, but you're not Professor Kennedy. And they're like, well, thanks.
That guy can really teach math.
They're like, well, he really knows what he's doing. I'm like, well, thank you. I appreciate
Well, and he
it.
also has a degree of certainty that, frankly, you don't have.
I appreciate the remark, first of all. And I mean, I work hard at it. I take it seriously, but actually, to Ian's point, there is a little bit of something there, I think, in that it really is possible on sort of a weekly basis in a math course, if you're working hard, to go every week from having no clue what's happening to really feeling like you've mastered it, and so, I get to ride along with that experience and stuff. So, I love, doing what I can to help students through that. But, it really is, mastering something in math it's sort of so doable and so gratifying that it makes a good math class feel really great. I mean, one of my, I just remember by way of contrast, one of my favorite classes that I took as an undergraduate was a philosophy class called Individual and Society. And it was a wonderful class. And we sort of went from sort of classical liberal theories of justice, like we started with John Rawls, and then we talked about Sandel and different sort of more community based sort of ideas of the good life and justice and everything. And by the end of the class, I mean, it was fascinating, and I thought about a lot and I learned a lot. But by the end of the class, there remained sort of these big questions like, what does community mean?
Right.
And so it was much harder for me to put my finger on what did I actually learn. I knew that I'd had my mind blown, and I knew that I'd worked really hard on things, but it was harder for me to point to like, okay, that's what I've got now. Yeah. And so, one of the things that I myself like about math, as we were talking about before, is you sort of move from not getting anything to getting anything and then knowing it cold. I think that's also something that is fun about taking a math class.
That's cool.
See, the funny thing is that I avoided math, but I'm a person who I love progress and I love certainty, right?
Yeah.
But I avoided math because I wasn't very good at it. And you went into physics, Kurt, because you weren't that good at it.
That's correct. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's correct, yeah.
And
by far the most challenging thing I'd ever done.
right. And I think the reason I was a history major was because I was good at it, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that I love certainty. So I'm unhappy most of the time with my research.
Oh yeah.
So I probably should have taken a math course.
Yeah, you should have.
Well, but of course, I think that's the same all over, right? I mean, and I tell this to my students, and I have to remind myself of it. The cost of doing business, right? If you're doing, research and anything that's sort of hard, right, is you spend 99 and 44/100ths of your time feeling like an idiot, right? and you don't get it, and you don't get it, and you don't get it, and then you do, and often, I mean, I don't know if it's similar for you, Ian. I'd be curious to hear about it. So often in math, the experience is once you do get it, it seems obvious, right? Because of course you've put together the line of reasoning, and at the upper level especially, I have to talk my students down all the time, right? Because they'll be working on something for hours or days, and then they'll get it. It's like, that's so obvious. Why didn't I get it before? And I just have to say, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
And you have to decide that the good feeling you're having now is enough to carry you through, because you do spend most of your time just like, why can't I do this?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very similar. And one of the things I always go back to is that scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when he says to his students, X never marks the spot. But sometimes I've been in the archive and I've been thinking about something and I've not gotten it. And then I find a document and I'm like, why didn't I look at this earlier? Why didn't I discover this earlier? This is literally X marking the spot, right?
Yeah.
So I think about that an awful lot. And I also just think about the fact that, to your point, Ben, the idea of feeling like an idiot is part of the motivation, I think, to keep researching, right? Yeah. Because those feelings are things that all of us are pretty good at our jobs and feel like we can reconcile certain questions. So when there's a question we're really struggling with, we really want to double down on that question, right? And try to figure it out. At least that's the way that I look at it.
I'll be honest, it's really different for me. We do a bunch of experiments. You come with a result that you think is true. But as an experimental physicist, in the back of your mind, even after you publish the paper, you know all of the little tiny things that we're pretty sure we controlled for, but I don't actually know for sure that we controlled for. Or like, well, we didn't do this, but I don't think it matters, but it could matter. And there's basically 100 of those for every paper you publish, and you just hope that you've done enough due diligence that it probably is okay.
Right. And as the years go by and nobody tells you a mistake you've made, does that mean you didn't make a mistake or just that nobody's reading
Nobody's
it?
reading it. Exactly. No, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So no, there's actually a funny little saying which like in physics, which is that so theorists have a much different approach to it. It's more kind of what a mathematician does. And so the whole joke is that nobody except for nobody believes any theorist's paper except for the theorist. And for a researcher, everyone believes the researcher, for experimental researcher, everyone believes the experimental research paper except for the person who did it.
See, but this is why you guys make me really nervous. Physicists make me really nervous because they approach everything with this level of confidence, right?
Oh, yeah. It's all fake. I mean, history. When they put the bomb down, they're like, probably won't ignite the atmosphere.
But hey, we're going to bet on it. We're going to make it into a joke.
I mean, the good news about that is they did know definitively afterwards. I mean, that's an exciting. Then you're like, well, we've answered that question.
Right.
It didn't.
That time.
Good job. That's one time. Exactly. Under those specific conditions. Excellent. Well, Ben, so what do you do? I guess can we do our big question?
Our big question.
Yeah. So, Ben, what brings you joy?
Oh, well.
Okay, wait. You know the caveats already. I talked to him about this beforehand.
I do know the caveats. I know no Hallmark crap.
I was just
yeah.
He has a family that he loves very much.
I actually,
my students. We should put that one.
Students. He loves his students. We all love his students.
So I actually am gonna do the the thing that academics and Donald Rumsfeld like to do, which is I'm gonna take issue with your question and then answer a different question.
The no.
So I guess because I was thinking about this because I've heard you ask some other people, and in all seriousness, I think when I think of the word joy, I think of this sort of profound sensation of consonance with the universe, right? And I guess I believe you can't will that or make it happen. I believe that with certain, practices, there are certain things you can do to make yourself more receptive to those, but that kind of happens to you. It's a gift, like a solar flare of the soul, right? I mean, it's like,
Solar Flare of the Soul would be a really good album.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So
that's copyright Ben Kennedy. Right. No one can take that. That's argument.
But I think it's an interesting but sort of a personal question about how you make yourself receptive to that sort of state of mind and that way of being. So instead, I'll answer the question: what brings me pleasure?
Okay.
Because that's like a recommendation and or things that you can sort of do. Well, music is really important to me. It doesn't count as Hallmark yet, does it?
No. Music's okay.
All right. Good.
No, and I was going to ask him about music too.
Yeah. So I play music avocationally. I listen to it. So that's a big deal for me. And I can actually manipulate my mood pretty reliably by doing that. And it's a big part of my life. I talk to a lot of people who assert to me how similar math and music is, like doing math and doing music. I really disagree very much. I don't think I don't think they're the same at all.
Because that was going to be one of my assumptions that I was going to ask you about music.
You're like, because music is fun.
Well, I guess really what makes you like something in music is, I feel, or what makes it work is so much more culturally constructed, so when I'm listening to, suppose you're listening to someone in the sort of, soul or funk gospel kind of thing going on, and this high B3 organ comes in, up there, right? And that's like sanctified, right? And all of a sudden you're in church, right? And of course, without those associations, that wouldn't melt your face, right? That would just be a sort of out of tune, keening, warbling thing. So I really think they're different. But that's important to me. I really like that. I like being out in the woods for up to 48 hours alone. After 48 hours, I start to feel a little weird.
You get a little squirrely.
Yeah, I get a little squirrely. But I really like that. I have to get, okay, this might be semi-Hallmark, right? You might have to take this away, all right? But we'll
bleep it out.
We'll bleep it out. And
you got the button.
Oh, yeah.
A completely unexpected, did you just bleep me?
No,
awesome.
No.
Just getting ready.
No.
Okay. An unexpected pleasure I've found is from my kids' friends. Like, this is a relationship I didn't expect anything about as I was getting older, but there's like those handful of like your kids' friends that you sort of know pretty well, and you can be like that 100% sort of not invested but supportive adult who's just like,
the cool uncle.
And that's and that's something I've enjoyed about, I guess, living in a smaller town and getting to know as the kids have gotten older. But yeah, I think that's what I got for you on that.
Ben, I'm going to dispute your disputation.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to tell you, because your idea that you cannot fabricate joy, I think, is wrong. Because I will tell you, as someone who's played soccer with you, I know for a fact, after you have scored a goal and are screaming in an opponent's face. That is as close to pure joy as one can get.
I suppose that might be a sort of a transcendent experience, but it doesn't happen very often. So, well, yes, no, those pickup soccer games are of course a lot of fun, and I actually think that there is a little bit of a life lesson to be learned from those pickup soccer games, because it's great practice in getting really invested in something with no stakes, and you're going to leave it behind, right? Which is fun, right? Because often when you get that worked up about something, you're going to stay mad, right? But if you can, if you have that kind of outlet where you can really emote and not brood about it afterwards, that's great. I mean, I Kurt knows this story, but I played basketball in college. I was terrible at it. I loved it. But it was something I felt very intensely about, and I was not really able ever to shut it off. And so I had to stop playing basketball, first because I was getting hurt all the time. But secondly, the last time I played, I was playing with some colleagues of ours, the sweetest guys you could imagine, all of them, like total sweethearts, and I'm cursing and elbowing and slamming the ball on the ground, and it's like, this is not me anymore, So, right, soccer, where I have zero identification or pride, in being able to play it, and just going out like, whoa, sort of like a Great Dane, just kind of flopping around, and yeah, so that's there is something there in terms of mood management for sure. Yeah.
Well, excellent.
Well, I think it's time for us to take a little bit of a break.
That sounds great.
All right. Welcome back to the Ivory Attic. I'm Ian Isherwood.
And I'm Kurt Andreessen.
And we have a segment that we're going to do now that's called, what is it, Kurt?
I give up.
Did you know?
Oh, yeah.
Which is our quiz portion of the show. We are keeping up with a current theme that we've had, where we've pitched our quiz questions out to Dean Chat.
Dean Chat really pulling her weight these days. I feel like.
Absolutely. Working overtime for us. Well, it's about the start of a semester, and Dean Chat's got a lot on Dean Chat's plate, coming up with budgets for the new year,
of course,
what to cut, what to eliminate. Yeah, everything, right. But Dean Chat took time out of Dean Chat's busy schedule of cutting and coming up with course enrollment increases to then end up putting together some questions for us. So the question I asked Dean Chat was to come up with a funny quiz specifically for math professor.
Okay.
All
right.
So, question 1.
There aren't going to be ugly math tropes, are there? Because I don't want to promote anti-mathematician viewpoints.
I wouldn't be able to recognize them if they're there. So.
And if I have an issue with some of these questions, I assume that it'll do me about as much good as when I attempt to extend the loving rod of correction over any other dean.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, question 1. If you have 10 apples and eat half of them, how many apples do you have left? A, 5. B, 0. C, half of an apple. Or D, a tummy ache.
Well, I might have 5 apples and a tummy ache, or half of 10 apples and a tummy ache.
Okay. Is that your answer?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You got that one wrong. It's half an apple. I'll explain it because I asked.
Read the question again.
I was going to say because
Because I asked Dean Chat to
you got
explain
me.
it to me. Half an apple. The caveat is, this quiz is meant to be humorous, so the right answers are playful and subjective. However, here are the answers that match the humor of the logic of each question.
Well, there's no arguing with that.
So question 1 is half an apple, because if you ate half of one, you still have 9.5 apples left. The answer plays on the ambiguity of the question.
That's hilarious. I love that. I really do.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to forward these to you.
Wow, that's off to an amazing
Off to
start.
a great start. Question 2. Why did the math book look sad? Is it A, it had too many problems? B, it couldn't find its X? C, it was too square? D, it didn't know its roots?
Those are all good punchlines.
Those are great. I mean, how can I choose?
You're gonna have to choose which one it was. I'm sorry.
Well, oh my goodness. I'll have to say it had too many problems.
You got that one correct.
Hey, all right.
And the description is, this is a classic math joke.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
If 2 wrongs don't make a right, what do 2 rights make? Is it A, a correct answer? B, a U-turn? C, a pair of orthogonal vectors? No idea what that is. D, a really bad pun.
Well, it's a really bad pun either way, so I feel like that's a can't miss answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a U-turn.
Oh. And now I feel pathetic for trying so hard to answer the question right. You're making me feel small.
Okay. It's not me. Don't say me. It's Dean Chat.
I apologize, Ian. Go ahead.
Next question.
I thought you were going to explain to us why that was funny. No, that's right.
No, no explanation needed. It's hilarious.
That's how jokes work well.
Yeah.
If a math professor tells a joke in class and no one laughs, does it count as humor? A, yes, it's just unappreciated. B, only if it's in good form. C, depends on the delivery. Or D, pi, is that divided by pi equals 1, so yes?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I don't know. It just said that.
I like when Dean Chat really goes for the knife, like really tries to stick it in there, like.
So this one's hitting a little close to home. So I'm gonna have to say, A, and I'm gonna stand on that. I'm going to the mat.
Okay, that is the correct answer.
There we go. All right.
It's good to know that when the chips are down, Dean Chat and I see eye to eye. Yeah.
With the explanation suggesting that a joke is still humor, even if it doesn't get laughs.
Funny.
I guess. So, Ben, have you seen the movie Clue?
No.
Okay, I'm not going to ask the next question then, because I came up with my own question.
Oh, I see.
But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask one more from Dean Chat. I love this one. What's the best way to stay warm in a cold math classroom? A, stand in the corner. It's always 90 degrees. Hug a math book. It's full of topics. Solve for heat, or just multiply your layers.
Full of topics.
Full of topics one I didn't get, I'll be honest.
I'm going with that one. Full of topics.
Congratulations. You passed the quiz.
Wait, I need to hear why that's funny.
No, I decided it. It wasn't Dean Chat. Dean Chat said 90 degrees.
Excellent. Okay.
But 90 degrees was too corny,
right,
and his answer was better.
I like
that. But this is
topics. I like that. Yeah.
Because Dean Chat said, stand in the corner, it's only 90 degrees, is a clever play on the geometry of a right angle. And that's not true because I got the joke, so it can't be that clever.
Not that clever, right? Exactly.
Oh no imposter syndrome from the joke delivery chair.
All right, well that didn't go well.
Well, Dean Chat has a lot on, a lot to do these days.
But here is what Dean Chat said. Underscoring key. If you laughed at least once, you pass.
Aw.
Oh, okay.
And 2, if you didn't laugh, Congratulations, you have the true stoic nature of a mathematician.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's something. Now we are getting.
Dean
okay,
Chap throws a little bit of shade.
Yeah,
That's
like-
win-win. Oh, no shade at all. That's great.
All right.
All right,
well,
let's definitely move on.
I think we
Yeah.
should move on. Where are we going?
We're going to What's Your Style?
Excellent. All right, Ben.
Yeah.
What's your style?
So I was worried about this because, you guys look fabulous. You always do. Sartorially, I think we're going to have to move around this kind of quick because I admit I, anticipating this question, asked my wife last night, do I have a style? And she sort of sat there for a second, and then she said, 1994.
It was a good year.
And that's about it. I was in the office for 2 hours this morning in this snazzy shirt I'm wearing before I realized it was on inside out. I actually sort of cop an attitude about not really caring. I think I care more than I sort of admit. Part of it is that it's difficult for me to find things that fit me because I'm built like an ape. So if I find stuff that fits, I pretty much go with that and leave it there. So yeah, sartorially, I think I've got very little to offer. My personal style, as I think of it, is I like to have sarcasm ready at my right hand at all times, but I try my best to know when to leave it alone, when to be serious and when to be playful. But
And maybe you could teach Kurt that.
Yeah, well,
No, I don't
never, ever. I will no limits.
Sometimes you got to keep the right hand in the pocket.
Yeah, well, yeah. This is something numerous friends, children, my wife have talked to me about.
yeah, well, with our kids, at home our tone is frequently a little bit on the flip side, right? And so I remember as our kids were getting, to be 10, 11, 12 years old, we had to talk to them occasionally and say like, okay, that just if you're with somebody else who's talking about something they care about,
Right.
you might need to like not, you keep it a little more buttoned down.
Which explains why I enjoy your kids so much. Can I ask? I don't mean to harp on this, but I it's only because I am just really curious. I feel like some people, I have a pretty good idea about what they would have worn in high school. I actually don't have that for you. I'm curious. What was it like? What was your like?
Didn't I just tell you my style?
Oh, I see.
1994?
So it's exactly the same. Okay,
It's pretty close. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, my pocket load was established by the time I was 12. I did make a room for a phone in one pocket since then, but yeah. Yeah. Pants, shirt, shoes. They're still, it's funny. As I said, I sort of cop this attitude about not caring, but there are some things that I like. I very rarely wear, a t-shirt with any kind of text that's visible, in public. I very rarely go out in shorts. But I also, I view thinking about clothes and shopping for them as a burden mostly. So,
Sure.
I did, though my family gave me as a gift before I got married, a suit. They sent me to have like a suit made. And the best part of that experience wasn't the suit, which was gorgeous. I loved it, but it was the sucking up that came with the suit. So, I went to sort of try it on once it was all done, and I'm upstairs in this, tiny little office in this crumbling New York building, and these 6 guys are looking at me with their chins in their hands, saying, "Oh yes, yes, that's it. You look like a movie star." So that was a pretty cool experience.
I mean, Ben, that's why we go to suit stores.
Yeah.
It's purely for the. It's purely for
Yeah, it's purely for the sucking up.
I was going to say
Yeah.
the constant sucking up.
Because we need the validation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Oh no, it was really fun. The same. Before I put on that suit to get married in, I actually went to an old-fashioned barber shop in Cambridge to get shaved.
Oh, nice.
Also that day,
Yeah.
and there was one guy. They sort of brought him out of the back room to come. Older guy, hand a little shaky, but he did a
That's
good
what you
job.
want to see when you're holding a straight razor. I love it. Well, I think
we've earned it.
we've done it, right? We've made it too.
We've made it to Kurt's Cocktail Corner.
All right, so let's take a break and then we'll go there.
All right, sounds good. Welcome back to the Ivory Attic. I'm Ian Escherwood.
And I'm Kurt Andreessen.
And we are back for Kurt's Cocktail Corner with Professor Ben Kennedy.
All right.
Now, what's the name of this cocktail?
The name of this cocktail, there was a lot of debate about the name, but I think we settled on, I settled in my mind, on Proof Positive.
Proof Positive. Why is it called Proof Positive?
Well, as Dean Chat would explain to you if you asked, it's a clever play on words.
Okay.
Because in math, people use proofs, but proof is also something that has to do with the amount of alcohol that's in our alcoholic beverages.
Which is a percentage.
Yeah.
Which is also math.
As I understand.
Right.
As I
See?
understand.
I'm making
Yeah.
these connections.
Yeah, I know. It's great.
Uh-huh.
Excellent. And so let me just tell you what Ben told us about what he wanted for his cocktail. The cocktail theme was this: what I wanted isn't what I got. Often to solve a mathematical problem, you have to simplify it so much that by the time you deal with it, it bears almost no resemblance to the question that motivated you to begin with. Can you talk yourself into loving what you're stuck with? Hopefully, we'll talk ourselves into loving what we're stuck with here. So we'll have a sip of Proof Positive, and then maybe I'll talk to you about what we did.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, I like that.
I love what I'm stuck with.
Yeah. So the idea was I wanted to make so something where we had taken something that is a relatively complicated drink, but then simplified it. This is actually a whiskey sour, or similar to a whiskey sour, but the way that I've simplified it is I've removed a lot of parts of it using a milk wash.
Oh, the milk wash.
So this has been milk washed, and so that's why it's a little lighter. But to do that, you also had to do some interesting things because you're introducing a bunch of liquid in there. Even once they get the solids out, there's extra water and stuff like that in there. So I used some special whiskey that you know about, which is some high proof whiskey that we have, which is part of the idea behind Proof Positive. Another pun, which are 60%.
From the Bare Knuckle Distillery?
From Bare Knuckle Distillery that you and I bottled.
That we bottled this whiskey, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So you're drinking, and so that helped balance it out to make it a little bit more balanced and get the proof back up to what a whiskey sour should be.
What a great connection, too. So
exactly.
So that distillery is in Virginia. It's in Northern Virginia. If they would like to sponsor the Ivory Attic, they can write to us at mail.ivoryattic.com.
Yeah, we'll tag them on there.
Yeah, we'll tag them, definitely.
Absolutely. But yeah, and so that's why you get this beautiful head on the top of the
it's
cocktail.
Really nice.
And the idea of the simplification is, again, we're just removing stuff, paring it down. But also, I wanted to, you'll notice that by making it simpler, I also made it really, really complicated
You
by
did a
having
lot
to
of
milk
work,
wash,
yeah. The
which
milk
to
wash,
me
yeah.
is a lot like what mathematicians do as well, which is that you're simplifying things and then you do an enormous number of things trying to get it to where it needs to be.
I think that's gorgeous. I think that's beautiful.
So just to contrast, whenever I make a simple whiskey sour, I just throw 2 ounces of bourbon in a rocks glass and top it off with a little lemonade.
Exactly.
So
I did consider that, I'll be honest, but I decided against it for reasons that you probably know.
right.
Well, excellent. Well, I think we've done it once again.
I think we've done it once again. Thank you so much for being our guest, Ben
Oh my
Kennedy.
goodness, thank you, Ben.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And so I'm Ian Isherwood.
Nope, not yet.
Not yet.
Come
I'm sorry.
on.
Hey,
It's been so
if
long.
It's summer vacation. I'm a little bit rusty going into
all
this.
right.
You know, it's also really hot.
Hey, people are dying to contact us right now.
They are.
How are they? You barely even mentioned it
yes,
for the
you can
for the Bareneko.
Yes, you can contact us on social media. So we are on Facebook at the Ivory Attic. We are on Instagram at the Ivory Attic. We are Ivory Attic hosts on X. Though we're not on X that much, but we still have an account just in case anybody's rushing to grab our account.
Just flying over there.
And you can also email us.
Wonderful. And where would we do that at?
It's mail at ivoryattic.com.
Mail at theivoryattic.com.
All right.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. And I'm Ian Isherwood.
And I'm Kurt Andreessen.
And thank you for joining us as we rummage through the Ivory Attic.